24. Sa eva jiva lokasya Sa eva jiva lokasya Maya mohita chetasaha Maya mohita chetasaha Vidatse svena viryena Vidhatse svena viryena Shreyo dharmadi lakshanam Shreyo dharmadi lakshanam Saeva jiva lokasya Maya mohita chetasaha Svena viryena Sveyo dharmadi lakshanam Saeva jiva lokasya Maya mohita chetasaha Chetasaha Datse svena viryena Sveyo dharmadi lakshanam. Matajis? Saeva jiva lokasya Maya mohita chetasaha Vidatse svena viryena Shreyo dharmadi lakshanam. Word to word translation. Saha, that transcendence. Eva, certainly. Jiva lokasya, of the conditioned living beings. Maya mohita, captivated by the illusory energy. Chetasaha, by the heart. Vidhatse, execute. Svena, by your own. Viryena, influence. Shreyaha, ultimate good. Dharma adi, four principles of liberation. Lakshanam, characterized by. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. And yet, though you are beyond the purview of the material energy, you execute the four principles of liberation characterized by religion, and so on, for the ultimate good of the conditioned souls. Purport. The personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, descends on the manifested world without being influenced by the material modes of nature. He is eternally beyond the material manifestations. He descends out of his causeless mercy only to reclaim the fallen souls who are captivated by the illusory energy. They are attacked by the material energy and they want to enjoy her under false pretexts, although in essence the living entity is unable to enjoy. One is eternally the servitor of the Lord, and when he forgets this position, he thinks of enjoying the material world, but factually he is an illusion. The Lord descends to eradicate this false sense of enjoyment and thus reclaim conditioned souls back to Godhead. That is the all-merciful nature of the Lord for the fallen souls. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Itinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gauravaktaranda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. And yet, though you are beyond the purview of the material energy, you execute the four principles of liberation characterized by religion and so on for the ultimate good of the conditioned souls. So Srila Prabhupada here is talking about how the living entity is trying to enjoy this world, captivated by the illusory energy, but they're unable to enjoy. Right? So we are always given this impression that the modern society is a very egalitarian or equitarian society, right? Everybody is equal. In fact, when people talk about, they say that we have democracy, right? Democracy creates equality among people. And they compare this to some societies that don't practice democracy, or they basically show how there is inequality amongst people. This whole the modern story of people being happy and equal and all this, Srila Prabhupada could see right through it, right? And then he would illustrate in many places how we have just created such a false sense of so much complicated our lives, and actually people are actually not any happier than they ever were in the history of civilization itself. The inequality that exists today in this world is so ridiculously great. It's in fact, it's many times greater than what it has been in the history of civilization itself. If somebody knows the statistics, if you take the wealth of the top 1% of the society, right? I mean, top 1% is still a pretty big number, just the top 1%. And compare it to the wealth of 50% of the rest of the families. Anybody know how big the ratio is? Any guesses? The wealth of the top 1% compared to the bottom 50%. How much difference do you think is there? Any guesses? 100%. You are very 100% more is actually only 2 times more. No, it's much bigger. One more guess. 75-1. You're pretty close. $51 trillion versus $1 trillion. 51 times is to 1. Can you imagine? Just 1% of the population and the rest, 50% of the entire world. So that is the level of inequality that exists today. How is this different from, they keep saying, in the olden days there used to be kings and these people, they were exploiting these people. That's exactly what is going on today in a very polished way. That is the modern society. Prabhupada used to say that it is the duty of the king to establish a system in which people can happily practice their progression in the four principles. What are the four principles of liberation that is being talked about in this sloka? What are these four principles? We all know this. Huh? Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. It is the duty of the kings or the administrative class to set up a system. And it is the duty of the brahmanas or the academic class to guide the establishment of these four principles. See, let us try to understand this. Like, what is Krishna trying to do? Why is this necessary? What is the role of this place in the society? Right? See, what happens is that in the material world, living entity is trying to enjoy happiness that really doesn't exist. Right? I mean, if you really actually analyze anybody's life, it doesn't matter. Like you might say, oh, I am not happy, but the rich people are happy. Right? Everybody has a perception of who the rich person is who is happy. You go and talk to anybody, right? Everybody has a very clear idea. It's not like ambiguous or something. I am at this level. If I reach this level, they're happy. And you go and actually look at different people. You go and you should actually do this exercise sometimes for your own understanding of how much this is just a total illusion. Right? There are poor people. There are people who live go to a village in India, right? Next time you make a trip to India, because you'll get a bigger, wider category of people very easily, right? Go and talk to somebody and say, okay, what is it? How much do you earn? When do you think you'll be happy? Right? Usually everybody has somebody they'll take 7, 8 levels above them, like 4 levels above, 5 levels above. They can't perceive something that is like 1,000 times above or 1,000,000 times above. They can't even perceive it. They can't relate with it. Right? If you have, if you're earning, $100,000, you can perceive somebody who's earning maybe $1 million. Like somebody earning $1 billion is like not beyond my scale, right? So like that, everybody has this illusion. And the point is, it will be such a funny and real thing that at every level, everybody is thinking of the next level. If you go to a billionaire, he's actually thinking there are other billionaires who earn $50 billion and $100 billion. Look at that person, how powerful and rich he is. Look at my unfortunate situation. You go to a beggar, he has got exactly the same thing. Me, I only beg and earn 200 rupees per day. This particular beggar in this particular corner of this street, he's got a prime spot and he's able to earn, $2,000 rupees in a day. That's the exact word. In fact, the Bhagavatam goes on to classify all this material enjoyment in a very nice way. There's a sloka in the Bhagavatam. I'm sure many of you would have read this. I'll just read it to illustrate this point. 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, text number 19. Swavid varahasya karaihi samstuta purushah pashuhu nayat karna patopeta jatu nama gadagrajaha. Men who are like hogs, dogs, camels and asses praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna, the deliverer from evils. So all of this material enjoyment is classified into the enjoyment of these four animals: dogs, hogs, camels and asses. And Srila Prabhupada when he talks about this loka, he goes on to explain in detail why Bhagavatam is comparing material happiness to these four, and illustrates the fallacy of this material world very clearly by taking these four examples. Right? The first example that is given is of dogs, right? So, Prabhupada explains why in the material world people are compared to dogs. In this modern society, we have created this doggish mentality, Prabhupada says. What is a dog's mentality? What do you think is a doggish mentality being talked about? What does a dog do? Dog is trying to serve a master. Right? And it's like very loyal and faithful to that master. And Prabhupada says, it is serving for scraps. The statistic we just talked about actually illustrates that. Right? The bottom 50% of the society is really like serving the top 1% for scraps. Like, very small, this thing, it's made to look like you do this, you'll achieve ultimate happiness, but everybody knows there is a limit. It just the illusion is created. Everybody, you can also become Jeff Bezos, you can also become Steve Jobs. There are only, how many of them are there? There's one of each. That's the illusion that's created. We have created this mentality of serving a master. That to a false master who is just giving you scraps. So Prabhupada says, modern university education practically prepares one to acquire a doggish mentality with which to accept the service of a great master. Right? After finishing a so-called education, the so-called educated persons move like dogs from door to door with applications for some service. And mostly they are driven away, informed of no vacancy. All dogs are negligible animals and serve the master faithfully for bits of bread. A man serves a master faithfully without sufficient rewards. So this is the nature, is that the nature of a living entity is to serve somebody. And instead of serving the ultimate master, who is so kind and merciful to us, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, we all try to find a material master, right, who only gives us scraps. And that is one of the primary natures of this material enjoyment, dog's enjoyment. The other one is hog's enjoyment. What is the characteristic of a hog? What is the most blatant characteristic of a hog? He eats stool. Yeah, indiscriminate eating. Right? Without thinking, what it is. And Prabhupada says that people in the modern world, they have no discrimination in terms of food stuff. And eat all sorts of nonsense. And that is why they're compared to hogs. If you think about it, if you take a person's time spent in a day, you will see that actually eating occupies a very important part of a person's life. Like, have you realized that? The easiest way to experience it is when you don't have food, right? When you're always every day, prasadam is coming, or it's all being set up, it's very easy, but suddenly you're deprived of it, then you understand. Even devotees we can understand. But if you really analyze the outside world, so much elaborate arrangement is made to enjoy different kinds of food. It's actually an important, big aspect of a person's so-called enjoyment in this world. And, the world is so caught up in this indiscriminate enjoyment of food. Never in the history of human civilization has humanity as a whole tortured other living entities for their food. Never. The scale at which it is being done right now is unheard of. Like, it's not that, oh, in some time, some age they did this. It is like many, many times more. It's almost like that inequality thing, it's like multiples more than ever done in the history of human civilization. Because if you think about it, like in terms of food, the harm being given to other living entities, in terms of killing animals and all that, obviously that has been going on forever. As long as human beings are there of different categories, there will always be people who will eat meat. Right? Because that is a pleasure, a perceived pleasure, and people will be ready to commit any kind of sinful activities for their tongue. But it was done in a very limited way, very controlled way, in a very intermittent fashion. Right? Even people who are even born in meat-eating families, they can go back and reflect, because this is not like you have to go back hundreds of years or something. Right? I was unfortunately born in a meat-eating family, and I have very good recollection of my childhood, where I grew up in a village for a few periods of years. It was very like once a week, maybe once every 15 days, under very like they would have some pretext for it and create something. It was never the kind of gross meat eating and killing that is happening today. Today, so some civilizations, like especially in the Western civilization, people eat meat like all 3 times a day, and unlimited amount of suffering given to animals. So that is why that pleasure is compared to hogs. In fact, Prabhupada even goes on to say that, in this purport he explains how the human being, usually all our teeth are not, they're called, like herbivorous teeth, right? We have only 2 canine teeth, Prabhupada says. That too, the 2 canine teeth are given, so that we know that they're indiscriminate human beings. For them to tear into flesh, these 2 canine teeth are given. And that's not the general norm, Prabhupada says. And he goes on to explain how we are all supposed to eat what is offered to Krishna. And Krishna says what can be offered to him. Patram, pushpam, phalam, toyam, yome bhaktya prayachati. That's all Krishna wants. Right? So that is the second nature, there's a hog, indiscriminate eating. And then the camels. This is a very interesting one. The camels, the pleasure of the camels is described. What is camels' pleasure and enjoyment? I think we all know this. Right? They eat thorns. Right? And Prabhupada explains how that, not that, a camel is given some special tongue that doesn't get cut by thorns or something. No, it actually gets cut by thorns. It's a little rough and all that, but it still gets cut by thorns, and blood comes out of the tongue of the thorn, of the tongue of the camel. That blood mixed with all this thing actually creates a taste that is very pleasurable to the camel. And so Prabhupada says, the camel is eating its own blood, and it's thinking it's enjoying. And this is compared to what? For human beings. Yes, Prabhupada explains how, this is compared to how the human civilization is so addicted to sex life. Prabhupada explains in many places that it takes 50 ounces of blood to create 1 ounce of semen. And so when somebody is indiscriminately trying to enjoy this gross pleasure, is just drinking his own blood. Right? So that is the description given of how foolish that particular enjoyment is. And it's not that, it is going to give somebody happiness. It's considered to an itching. You scratch the itch only gets worse, right? And the wound becomes bigger, and you start like, you feel like scratching more, and then and then it becomes a bigger wound, and then the scratching is not gone. The urge for scratching is not gone. And now you have a gaping wound on your hand, right? So that is the nature of the camels. And the last one is asses, right? What is the speciality of an ass? A hard work. For what? What does the ass get at the end of the hard work? Grass, which is readily and easily available everywhere. That is the sorry part of this whole thing. It's readily and easily available everywhere. Now, the washerman, is able to exploit the stupidity of this ass, puts a bag of grass in front of the ass, and makes it work so hard throughout the day. In fact, that is the nature of most of us in this world today. It is that the hard work that civilization is doing right now. I mean, it is, again, if you think about civilization, never in the history, like it's very, very rare to find the calm, everybody working so hard. It's like very rare in the history of this thing. People had so much time for other things. And historically we have seen that we are going more and more towards working ridiculous number of hours in a day. And in a place like Silicon Valley where we all live, where we're all supposed to be like, the top 1%, I guess, like we're supposed to be in the part of that thing, we see how everybody is working so hard, compared to the rest of this country itself, let alone, it is very, very unfortunate how the society is created like that. It was always, work was supposed to be a means of livelihood. And the society was created in such a way that people were actually satisfied with small things in life that gave so much happiness. The same things gives you happiness. It's just that we shift our own internal happiness to more and more complicated things. Like the amount of happiness that a human being, especially a human being, is predetermined. Amount of happiness and suffering is predetermined. You're not supposed to be like working so hard to get the same level of happiness. And that is these are the four animals that material happiness is compared to. And Krishna wants us to stop wasting time in this happiness and try to work towards enjoying the real happiness. Right? The Lord descends to eradicate this false sense of enjoyment and thus reclaim conditioned souls back to Godhead. That is the all-merciful nature of the Lord for the fallen souls. So, Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. The four principles of liberation. See, it is not that every living entity is suddenly expected to get detached from this world and suddenly overnight become liberated. Right? There is a prescription of how we can live a balanced life. The urge is to create a balanced life. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha are given in a particular sequence, that we are supposed to do activities that are prescribed for us, that what our nature is. In the Bhagavad Gita, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, What is basically being talked about in Bhagavad Gita, if you really think about it, if you boil down to the essence of the Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna that you should do duties or action that is befitting your nature. Your nature is the nature of a Kshatriya. Why are you talking about giving this up and going to the forest? Because that was the alternative Arjuna was giving. And Krishna goes on to explain to him how that it is better to die doing one's duty than try to do another's duty. This actually is a very, very fundamental aspect that is important even in Krishna consciousness as well. Srila Prabhupada explains this in many places. Prabhupada calls out this as Daivi Varnashrama. Right? It is important for us to understand our true nature, because we are supposed to engage in, as devotees, in devotional service that is in line with our true nature. That is the fundamental aspect of our lives. The central portion of our engagement should be geared towards the true nature. And this is an area where, again, the modern civilization has messed up our brains so much that it is hard to differentiate what our true nature is. It is hard to even differentiate what we enjoy and what are we supposed to do. It needs, it is like when you have high fever, right? I'm sure this last flu season, a lot of people experienced this flu much, much more than normal. When you have very, very high fever, and this, you really can't, you're not yourself, right? You don't do your normal activities. You can't, you're sort of in a bubble of your own, right? You can't think, you can't act. Imagine when you have 100, 103 fever, you are sort of delirious. Isn't it what you experience? You can't even think properly. You can't eat properly, you don't even know what you want, you feel like doing this, but you can't do that, you feel like sleeping, and just like, you're very completely disturbed and you have no clarity of vision. So Prabhupada many places explains that this modern civilization is that we have increased our fever. Our material fever has been dialed up to 103 degrees. Normally, material world means there is fever. 99 degrees, maybe 100 degree fever. See, 99 and 100 fever we have all experienced. Little uncomfortable, but still at least we are able to live and do our normal things. We take some medicine, a little bit this thing. But when it's dialed up to 103, you lose. That's exactly what has happened. In fact, that is why to understand what is our true dharma, what is our true, nature, and what we should be doing, it needs the help of other Vaishnavas. And it also needs for you to take some time out and do some intense reading and chanting and really understand, because I'm sure we would have experienced this in many parts of our lives, but each of us have our innate sort of comfort zone of this is a service or this is an activity that actually is most comfortable for me. This is my nature. And it is important for us to find our true nature, the dharma. And then when we execute that, it leads to artha, kama and moksha. Right? It leads to artha is the production of economic value, right? That is actually beneficial for the person. If you really think about it, for a person who is very studies oriented and academic in nature, who's like a Brahminical class, that's what we call as a Brahminical person, you will invariably find that Brahminical persons are very rarely attracted by wealth. They don't care. Right? You will see that a true Brahminical person, this thing right now, in fact, in a distorted way you can see in the outside world. There are these big professors, let's say you go to Stanford University, right? I mean, if you have to be a professor in Stanford University, materially we all know they have to be very accomplished scientists, right? I mean, nobody can just get a professorship there. And those accomplished scientists, let's say the computer science division, like there are some serious accomplished scientists. I mean, those scientists can, instead of just teaching and enjoying the rasa of knowledge and finding of information, they can give that up and go to the industry, right? And do the same thing, and for production of wealth. And they can earn like 10 times more, 20 times more, even 100 times more, right? But they don't want to do it. It's not their pleasure. They find so much enjoyment in doing deep research and finding knowledge and things like that. So, by following a true dharma, we really understand what amount of artha we need also. And then we will strive for the right balance that is needed for having a balanced spiritual life as well. Right? One of the hindrances to spiritual life is atyahara and prayasaha. Right? Over endeavor and eating too much, right? Eating too much is in multiple levels. And over endeavor, prayasaha. So, it is important for us to understand our true dharma, and that helps us to find the right means of artha. And that leads to kama, in satisfaction of the senses. Because as long as we have this material body, we will be encapsulated by this machine. The reality is that our experience of this world is through the senses. Right? It is not overnight, like you're not going to be like giving up this body. But you can spiritualize that kama, that enjoyment of the senses, by taking happiness, only through Krishna. This actually looks like a very difficult thing, but especially when you create a society of devotees, it is very easy to do. One person is very difficult, I agree. That's why, when you have a whole society of devotees, we help each other so that all our enjoyment can be through Krishna. That is our goal. When you think about the goal of the community, right? What is the goal of a collective community? Is for ourselves to be situated in nice Krishna consciousness and to give Krishna consciousness to others. Right? And this can be very happily, nicely done if you follow the principles that Srila Prabhupada gave. And if you think about the lifestyle that Srila Prabhupada created for all of us as devotees. And we should strive for this. We should be very, as a group, we can very easily do this. All aspects of it, when it comes to, see, everybody wants to eat varieties of food. That is why it's always said, your neighbor's food always tastes so much better, right? Because you're eating the same thing, like, oh, your wife cooks so nicely. That person will say, your wife cooks so nicely. That is the nature of this world. We want variety. We want a variety so that's why we create a community. There's so much opportunities for different people to cook and serve the Lord and offer it to the Lord. And we enjoy that prasadam. And it becomes a very pleasurable thing. Our goal is like that. Everything, we should get all our pleasure from Krishna. It is easier said than done. We all know this. It will take so years and years and we still struggle. There is some amount of vyabhicharini pleasure that we get in our day. And our goal is to reduce that to be all avyabhicharini. Right? The Bhagavatam talks about this. Yes, vyabhicharini is an unchaste person, right? That example is given. A wife's, this applies to both. It's not that it's just husband and wife. Man's pleasure should come from his wife, and his wife's pleasure should come from the husband. That's called as chaste life. When somebody is hankering for pleasure outside of that relationship, it is called unchaste. It's called vyabhicharani. And so we have to seek our pleasure from Krishna, from association with Krishna. And when we go beyond that relationship, it's called vyabhicharani pleasure. And so our goal is to create a lifestyle such that, it is very difficult to be totally avyabhicharani, but by praying to the Lord and begging for His mercy and taking the help of our spiritual authorities, we can create a lifestyle where everything can come. And this actually is a very, very important aspect of spiritual life. We have to come to the point of being avyabhicharani. There is no going away from that. In fact, you can measure in your own lives the amount of discomfort you are experiencing in your spiritual life. If you go, to ask people, are you very happy and satisfied in your life? Right? Some are, some aren't. Right? And sometimes in our lives we are, and in some phases of our life we are not. And if we truly go and analyze our own lives and go a little bit microscopic and try to do this, you will see that the amount of suffering we are going through in our lives as devotees will be very directionally proportional to how much of avyabhicharani activities you are doing in your day. It's very directly proportionate. There are times when we are so fortunate that things are going nice, we are so enthused in our devotional life, and we are like, whole day goes in devotional service, chanting, reading, doing service. No time for Facebook, WhatsApp, and this and that and all those things. Then you will see that you will be experiencing a level of calm and happiness and pleasure in spiritual life. So I want to reiterate the fact that we eventually have to get to 100% being avyabhicharani. So I'll urge, the only thing we can urge devotees is get there sooner, because it is very happy and pleasurable. It is not suffering or something like that. It is just illusory. You are changing your lifestyle from being dependent on the material enjoyment to being totally dependent on Krishna. But that gives you enjoyment. That is why its karma is there as part of that. And our karma should all come from association with Krishna. And that will finally give us moksha. Right? And the moksha for the living entities, for devotees, is to be eternally engaged in service of the Lord. Right? We are not after the different kinds of mokshas that are described in the Shastras. Right? The moksha of merging into Brahman, the moksha of becoming like one like God. Right? All those mokshas, we are only looking for the opportunity to be eternally engaged in service of the Lord. That is the moksha that devotees look for. So, in being Krishna conscious can actually give us these can actually get us established in these 4 principles of liberation that is being talked about in this sloka. And then the Lord actually wants us to enjoy, finally. We should understand this. It is the nature of a living entity to enjoy, and the Supreme Lord is most anxious for us to be always enjoying, and for us to come to a point where this 103-degree fever can be reduced and you can go back to your normal temperature. And then you will actually know, oh, this is how I'm supposed to get my actual happiness. Right now we're all confused and we are thinking this will give, that will give, this will give, that will give, and then we go on trying different things. And perpetually we are like the ass looking for the grass that is easily found everywhere. Right? And if we properly, situate ourselves in proper consciousness, we can get all our pleasure from Krishna and enjoy true happiness in life. So we'll stop here. Anybody has any quick questions or comments? No questions? Okay. Granthrat Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Bol Premanande.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam